𝗪cie𝗿𝗀, anytime and anywhere. Hey, it's free.
You are watching the multi-awarded Radio Bandido TV on channel 224 Sky Cable and TV Plus boxes. Simulcast on DZRJ 8:10 a.m. Informing, advising, and entertaining the Filipinos and OFWs around the world. Streaming live on www.facebook.com/DZRJ 8:10 a.m. or on YouTube, channel DZRJ 8:10 a.m. Radio Bandido.
The views and comments of the hosts and guests are not necessarily those of the station.
Hello, Philippines. This is Eric Lecain on the World News Jam on DZRJ and Radio Bandito TV. Thank you so much for joining us today. Now, we have, again, on our show, a very special guest. Attorney Vaughn is here. Hello, Vaughn.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. It's nice to be back. Sorry there's no Aloha shirt today, but maybe next time. I'm running out of prints.
We're so happy to have Attorney Vaughn on the show to explain stuff to us. Because you are, just so people out there maybe who don't know, so Attorney Vaughn is a lawyer. He's a Filipino lawyer who's currently working in the United States, but he's back here in the Philippines, in his home country, and you're continuing to work, but you're online.
Yes, I'm a remote lawyer.
Yeah, remote lawyer, which well, I would love to be a remote anything. But you're one of those lawyers, those very few lawyers that actually helps people. You're not a corporate lawyer.
Nope.
You help people. So. What is your? You explain to me. What is your expertise again?
Right now, I'm doing personal injury case in state of California. But before that, I did some nonprofit work for Wisconsin. I'm licensed in Wisconsin, and also can do federal cases across the country. So, yeah,
it's great to hear Filipinos out there doing something good for the world. And speaking of Filipinos, before we get, now we have a lot to get to today. Obviously, the world is going crazy this week, so we have a lot of things to get to. But before we get to the news, there is something that came out just recently, and I don't know how many people out there may have heard about this yet. The incident that happened in Vancouver, it was Saturday night about 8:30. And in Vancouver, they have a celebration there, the 𝗪cie𝗿𝗀𝗱 Festival, which is a Filipino festival celebrating Filipino culture and so forth. And as we know, in Vancouver, and as in a lot of Canada, there's a lot of Filipinos. There are a lot of Filipinos living there, working there. And anyway, at the 𝗪cie𝗿𝗀𝗱 Festival, the last band had finished. And people were just standing around when all of a sudden, out of nowhere, an SUV just picked up speed and went into the area for pedestrians and just went straight into the crowd. And we all know from the United States that when you drive a vehicle like that into a crowd, somebody's going to get hurt really bad. And so supposedly from onlookers, people were flying in the air, and it was really a scene,
scary,
and that no one screamed before the van because it came so fast. There was no chance to scream, no warning, no nothing. It just all of a sudden people were just going everywhere, and you couldn't hear any screams. You just hear the vehicle just going over people. So when the vehicle finally stopped, supposedly the driver got out, and the police got him pretty quickly. And supposedly he was yelling at all the people the bystanders to stop filming him. Guy was having kind of a mental episode there. But I've been watching the stories come through, and it's really changing like hour to hour. And the mayor there in Vancouver, he came out and said, our thoughts, go out to all the people affected, especially the Vancouver the Filipino community here in Vancouver. It's a very difficult time. Some of the people that they interviewed, and I went ahead and watched all the interviews that I could find, and people said it was a fantastic day. People were having fun. All the Filipinos were there. People from Vancouver were coming. It was just great. And it was just, this just all of a sudden just came out of nowhere right at the end, right after it was done, with people just milling around. But anyway, the prime minister, the current prime minister, came out and said, "I'm devastated to hear about the horrific events in the 𝗪𝗲𝗱 Festival in Vancouver. For the deepest condolences to the loved ones and those killed and injured." And that's when we learned that people were killed. And I just recently found out that 9 so far. Okay. 9 people have been killed, and a whole slew of people are injured. And so I don't know. I thought I would bring it up, and I know that you being from Wisconsin, you have some experience in this kind of thing, because in the United States, this would be big news, but this kind of thing happens. In fact, one of the onlookers in one of the interviews that I was saying said, this kind of thing only happens in the U.S., not here. And I don't know, I can't recall, I've been doing the news for about 12 years, I can't recall anything like this happening in Vancouver or Canada, for that matter. But I don't know, what's going to be tough is we don't know yet, right at this moment, how many Filipinos were actually, how many of those killed were actually Filipinos. But it's something, isn't it?
Right, yes, it's a very scary event and very heartbreaking. Obviously, condolences to the families, prayers to those who are affected. But looking at this news in the American context, it's one devastating. It's very sad that these things happening outside the U.S. Because I was in Wisconsin when that Waukesha parade happened, and that was very scary. But looking at the bigger picture, I think it would be very interesting to see how Canada responds to this thing. Obviously, in American lens, this type of thing can be labeled as a terroristic attack that is usually downplayed by the media, American media. The response by legislators are somewhat, very, very inactive, not enough. But, as we know, Canada has the opportunity right now to demonstrate how to respond to this on the legislative level, to see what kind of protection they will be having moving forward for events like this. Especially, it is a minority-led event in a diverse city like Vancouver. Just a lot of context and pretext that people will view this in, but because this is just new and developing, I think it would be a very interesting progress or response to see the response of Canada for this kind of
they don't think at the moment that this was a terrorist attack. They came right out and said that they think it might just be a crazy guy. But they're not ruling anything out yet. They think that he acted alone, that there was no other thing. It was just like a crazy mad guy. But the interesting thing I think about this is going to be the fact that the election, the national election, is now. It's today. It's it's happening Monday. So, I mean, as soon as their time, comes into 9 a.m. Monday a.m., the election will happen, the national election. And I think the Canadian election has gone through so many twists and turns. It's interesting how things work in Canada. In the United States, we start preparing for our elections like 2 years ahead of time. Right. But in Canada, it's like just a couple weeks. And, for a while, it looked like the Conservatives were going to win. And finally, the Liberals would be put out of office. They've been in office for a while. And the Conservatives, because, people had the same problem in Canada that they had in the United States at the time. The United States had their election as they didn't, prices were going up, and they were very concerned about inflation and so forth. And so, we'll vote for a conservative this time. And then things just changed like a couple of weeks ago. I mean, literally, if you look at the graph It looks like a big X because the Liberal Party now is in the front mostly because of what Donald Trump has done.
Right.
He threw these tariffs at Canada, which were insane, basically trying to get Canada to bend the knee to the president. And then this whole thing about, annexing Canada and making Canada part of the U.S., which everybody thought was kind of a joke. And then it turned out it wasn't a joke, that he really thinks that that's something that we should do. And he thinks that Canadians would be, I think his idea was that all the Canadians would be like, yeah, that's what we want. We would love to be part of the United States. And it didn't go that way. And that's why, I don't want to keep harping on this horrible thing that happened in Vancouver, but I'm wondering if that's going to have any effect on this election, which is it just happened to happen, the day before, 2 days before the actual election. And, this election is going to be really big. Because it's going to be such a tight race between two ends of the spectrum. The Liberal Party and, there's several other parties in Canada. Who the actual leader of Canada is? It's the King of England. I always found that kind of strange, that the King of England is actually, but they're a parliamentary government, so they vote for Parliament, then Parliament decides who's going to be the Prime Minister. Just literally just a couple of weeks ago, we didn't think the Liberals had a chance.
Right. It's certainly very interesting timing for this event and the events after. Before that, I think. Being liberal leaders leading, Canada and their response to Trump is being, well publicized, and they're really standing up to it. I think that's helping them, publicity that they're having, and in response to Trump's policies and statements, and basically just White House's general statements. I think that's very advantageous for them. But I think it's so close that it's so difficult to trust these projections or polls.
I know.
I've been heartbroken so many times by those things, so I'm hesitant.
2 times they said Trump can't win, and then he won the election.
Just close my ears and just pray.
And it's weird because it's kind of like these kind of things where something bad, something horrible happens like this can really can really twist an election's outcome.
Right.
And there are people right now in Alberta, Canada, there's little pockets of conservatism around there which are very extreme, and they kind of like the idea of Donald Trump being the leader of Canada. And there's this whole thing going on now called the group of Alberta Prosperity Project.
Wow.
And they're saying, well, we have more in common with the people of Montana than we do with our Canadian neighbors. And they're actually on the high road to become part of the United States or remove themselves from the government of Canada and be their own independent nation. Now, of course, that's not going to happen. I don't believe that Alberta, as small as it is going to be able to, in the middle of Canada, is going to become its own nation. But it's kind of interesting. I just see so many correlations between the United States, where people said, we don't like Donald Trump, but we need something to happen. We need prices to lower in the grocery store. And in Canada, it was the same. People were saying, listen, we don't really like this conservative guy, because the conservative guy was a big supporter of Trump.
Right.
And he's like, we don't really like this guy. But, the prices are too high in the grocery store. Just very simple things. And that's one of the things that got Trump elected. And that's one of the things that kept this conservative fellow, Pierre, whatever his name is, in the front until just recently, when people were like, "Oh, wait a minute, we don't want to end up like the United States. we don't want to be like that." And so everything changed. And so I think it's going to be interesting. Obviously, next week we'll be talking about the outcome of the Canadian election, because we won't know until probably tomorrow. We'll see. And even so, we don't know exactly. They have to pick the prime minister.
Right.
We just get to see who the parliament is. But it's going to, over this week, I'm sure we're going to hear a lot about the fallout of this thing that happened in Vancouver. We're going to find out how many Filipinos are involved, which I'm sure that's going to be tough to swallow. But it's be interesting how things are going. And besides, I don't want to keep harping on the death subject here, but Pope Francis was laid to rest this week, and I watched the funeral procession,
right.
and it was really nice. A lot of Filipinos thought a lot of Pope Francis, and there's a lot of people in the world that were very distraught, and at the funeral, everybody showed up.
Yeah.
It was all the leaders of the world. Donald Trump even showed up. I was surprised when I saw Donald Trump. He's sitting right there in the front row, because he has criticized the Pope many times, saying that the Pope was not Christian. Donald Trump says all kinds of things, calling him a disgrace, and I was like, oh wow, there's Donald Trump. But Zelensky was there, and this was the first time that Zelensky and Trump had met face to face since that time that he kicked him out of the White House without lunch,
right.
Took away his lunch. So they had a short meeting, and of course they said, it was great. We had a great meeting for 15 minutes. Okay, I don't know what you could discuss in 15 minutes, but did you catch any of the Pope funeral?
I saw clips online. Fortunately, I wasn't able to watch the full thing. But the buzz right now is,
who's going to be the next pope? Who's going to be the next pope? And what's interesting, and I just want to get your take on this, because it's interesting. I didn't know how they picked the next pope until
Really?
I looked up. I looked it up. And 135 cardinals will be sequestered in the Sistine Chapel to figure out who the next pope is going to be. And supposedly there's actually 10 that really decide who will be the future of 1.4 billion Catholics around the world.
Right.
But supposedly that there's 252 cardinals, and there's like 138 of those who qualify as electors, and somehow anyway, it's a little complicated, but they have 4 rounds of votes per day. So they vote 4 times a day, and eventually they'll pick some. And right now, supposedly there's 20 choices to be poppable. I think that is the correct word, poppable. Candidates for the papacy. See, I got to learn all these things about being a Catholic. But supposedly it's going to be a very heated debate, because there's a bishop there from the U.S. who is a big backer of Donald Trump, and of course he wants the most extreme conservative pope that you could possibly get. And there's a German thing that if they don't vote for an Orthodox pope, then they're going to split from the church. And supposedly, and here's the thing, supposedly Pope Francis purposely stacked the cardinals, because he knew, that he was not going to live too much longer, and to make sure he had control of who his successor would be. And a lot of people say, no, they didn't really do that. But that's supposedly why he didn't pick just, your typical, white Western cardinal. He picked people from around the world, all kinds of people, which kind of leads us to what our interesting story is about this. And I'm sure you know what I'm about to talk about, because the leaders in who's going to be Pope, Cardinal Parolin is the favorite right now. He's the Italian moderate. And this guy, Erdo, who's Hungarian, he's the guy that's the super conservative. Super conservative guy, doesn't believe in divorce, doesn't believe in taking in refugees, says they're like human trafficking. One of these guys that I don't want to say what I'm about to say about putting people up on the cross, but he's very conservative. And then there's a guy who's the liberal. And this is the guy that I want to focus on a little bit today. And I'm not sure if I can say his name correctly, Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle. Okay. He could very well be the first Asian pope ever, and he is Filipino. What would that mean to the Philippines if they could get a Filipino pope? So this is what's been, I'm sure, am I the only person that this is on his mind? But this has been, when I saw that, I'm like, oh my goodness, look who's third in line. Like,
he's a very popular candidate.
Very popular. I mean, I was reading a lot of stuff, and he's criticized the church on their stance on gay people, unmarried mothers, divorce, remarried Catholics. Very liberal guy, and he's very, very popular with the media, less popular with the cardinals, but people just are drawn to this guy.
Yeah, I think he's a very popular, icon, you would say, because of his stance with gay marriage particularly. That's probably one of the first huge publicity that he had, because for Philippines, which is a very religiously conservative country, against gay marriage, against divorce, a lot of very not so liberal policies are, being backed by religious beliefs. But then, you have a cardinal, probably the highest leader of the church in the Philippines, saying, "Hey, gays deserve rights." That's kind of like a radical shift in the religious history of the Philippines. So I think that's how he became very well known. And speaking of the candidates too, I was browsing through some of the popular ones. I think there's two significantly liberal candidates. One is at the Highland, which is 𝗡𝗲𝗄𝗧, and then Cardinal 𝗪cie.
Yeah, I went through and looked at, like I said, there's 20 in the running.
But it's very surprising to see a lot of them are very conservative choices.
Yeah. That's why I didn't go through. I didn't go through them. A lot of them are just your typical white Europeans. And there's others from around the world, but in general, and like they said, Pope Francis supposedly was not in the lead when he was picked. So the fact that this could possibly go, one way or another, but I think Pope Francis, what they were saying about him was he really tried to pick cardinals that he thought would continue his legacy.
Right.
And how do you talk about Pope Francis? He seemed like he was fairly liberal, although he's more moderate kind of guy.
I think one of the most accurate, I would say, analysis of his leadership with the church is he's trying to decentralize Christianity from Rome. That's evident with the cardinals that he appointed. He doubled Asian cardinals, decreased European cardinals. So he's trying to give more leadership to regional aspects or regional sections of the world. And I think that's very, very strategic for him. And that's why we have these, Filipino Asian candidates, black candidates. And what happens, so I think it's become more popular now. There's a whole Catholic processes are becoming more visible in a lot of media. We have the movie Conclave, and then now it's free to watch in streaming because of this Pope issue. And then I see it in social media too. Even they're making funny memes about who's going next, like reality show style.
I saw something the other day because everybody knows that the Pope is white. But the thing that's going to be, of course, it would be, it'd be great to have an Asian Pope, but you just, the underlying meaning of what it would be to have a Filipino Pope, I think it would just, I think the influence that this particular guy would have on the Philippines would be very good for the Philippines right now. And I took some time. I didn't really know much about him before, last week, and I really looked at his background and what his beliefs are and his ideology, and I think he would be a very good, very, very good Pope, especially for Asia. And because, and I've said this before, we've talked about the Pope on this show many times, that the Pope is not necessarily the leader of the Catholics. He is kind of a religious icon, because if you go and you start to look at other religions around the world, they don't have that specific person that you immediately go, oh, that's the leader of their religion. Whereas in Christianity, whether you're a Catholic or you're a Protestant or whatever, you immediately, it's the Pope.
Right.
I mean, and the Pope is not just, religious, also politics. It's like I said, Donald Trump was never a very big fan of the Pope, and the Pope was never a big fan of Donald Trump. But, but it show up, boy, it was talk about, they had Trump here, and then they had Biden right behind him.
I like to think of it as because Italy has a very conservative president right now, and she's very much aligned with Trump. So I like to view it that way.
Yeah.
He was invited because
and you got all these people sitting around him who are all like really mad at him right now. It's kind of funny. But speaking of Donald Trump. Here, by the way, we are here on the World News Jam on DZRJ and on Radio Bandito TV. My name is Lecain, and I'm here with Attorney Vaughn. We're talking about stories going on around the world. One thing I want to talk about a little bit was, obviously Donald Trump has been in the news every day, every hour, something changes, whatever.
When does it end?
But when does it end? But the thing was, he was voted in recently. He just is hitting his 100 days. So that's why we're kind of talking it now. It's just about to hit 100 days. And what has happened to him in 100 days is he has gotten less popular. And how do we know that? It's because all these polls came out this week. And his whole thing was he was going to make everything cheaper, and he hasn't made anything cheaper. He's made things more expensive, and now a lot of people are having second thoughts about voting him in. Of course, little too late. As you remember, right? He beat the black lady by 2%. But anyway, I won't go into that because I'll make myself
Don't remind me.
I'll make myself upset. But all the biggest polls are coming back, and currently the polling on Trump on every single category, he is underwater. Underwater means more people dislike him than like him, and that's with women and with men, with black men and white men. Hispanics, Asians, young people, old people, college grads, and high school grads, the people that really like him. His approval rating, averaging now, sits at around 40%. The Fox News poll came out. Fox News is Trump's channel. And they say, after 100 days in office, his approval rating of the economy is around 38%, and his handling of inflation and tariffs around 33%.
Wow.
So this is the first time, they say, it's the first time since 2001. Now, we all know what happened in 2001. That was when 9/11 happened. People saw their finances dwindling. And so everybody is like, okay, fine. Before, you could just vote for whatever president, and it didn't really have that much effect on people, but now it's having a direct effect on people who are looking mostly at their retirement and seeing it disappear.
Slowly disappear, like me. Prices haven't gone down. In fact, prices are going up. And we expect it to go up soon as well.
Yeah, that's their prediction. The prediction is that they will go way up in the coming future. And we keep hearing this phrase that I keep hearing on social media and on television, whatever. Oh God, what did we do? Coming from these Republicans.
Okay. I thought it was something else. There's the FAFO.
What did we do? Even the hardcore MAGA people, and they're doing these interviews, because that's what I want to know. The people that my friends from New York, it doesn't matter. They're all going to think the same. I want to know what the MAGA people think about this. And a lot of people are thinking, oh, well, let's just see. Let's see. Maybe he's got a master plan. And a lot of people are getting worried that maybe there is no master plan.
Yeah.
So that's, kind of where has been the big news this week is all these polls that have come out. The Pew poll came out with this week. Fox came out this week, New York Times. And his numbers have been dropping very fast.
Yeah, it's not surprising. And certainly it's hard to be at the end of a conversation saying that, hey, I told you so, because you're affected. We're all in the same boat here.
Yeah.
So you don't want to do that. But again, it's just a little painful to see that we never learned from his first term. It's just heartbreaking. And is this what it takes for American and young American voters to understand the importance of how to select a leader, or cross-check the information they find online, those kind of things?
Yeah, I think in the United States, people just thought to themselves, all right, you know what, we don't particularly like this guy, but we just want prices to come down, and he's the one that says he can do it. In fact, he said it'd be so easy, like day one, when he's the first day of presidency, prices are going to come down. It's the easiest thing. And so, and also before, when Trump was president before, he had professional people there, like working with him, saying, you know what, Mr. President, that's not a good idea. Maybe we shouldn't do that. And it took him a while, almost to the end of his presidency, where he could get rid of all those people that he didn't like. This one, he started out with people that only say yes. And we know because the people that are working with him now, the head of the Treasury, we know that he knows better. And he's saying things, it's like he doesn't mean that. He's just, he's just talking to one person to make sure that one person says it. But I mean, if you're looking at, right now we're talking about the United States, but let's get over and talk about the world, because right now we're in the Philippines. And right now, in the Philippines, in the United States, nobody's really noticing yet. Yeah. But the people from Walmart and Amazon and Costco, all those people went to visit Donald Trump recently, and they said, hey, listen, Mr. Trump, very soon, starting maybe next week, our shelves are going to be empty. The Chinese just aren't going to send us anything. Right. And he's like, oh, you know what? And this is one of the things that I think is going to last for a long time. And eventually we're going to start to feel it here in the Philippines, is that Trump has changed his mind so many times that nobody knows what the United States is going to do next. He had the tariff on Mexico and Canada, then he backed off. Right. Then he threatened to fire Jerome Powell, who's the Federal Reserve Chairman. And then, of course, the stock market went down, and everybody was really, oh my God, he's going to do that. He's going to put somebody in that's going to literally screw everything up. And then he backed off of that. Okay, all right, we're not going to. He put all these tariffs on every country, like every country in the world, including the Philippines. And then a week later, okay, we're not going to do that. We're going to delay it. Even countries that only had penguins, they put tariffs on, and then he's going to put 145% tariff on China. What is that going to do to the world? Everybody was freaking out. So China tariffed the United States 125%. Mm-hmm. I mean, these are, iPhone's going to cost, $10,000 for an iPhone. I mean, it was just insane. And then Trump came out just 2 days ago. Well, you know what? I don't think we're going to do that. But now everybody's like, well, okay, what's going to be next week? And so I think that's what is one of these things. It's not just going to go away, like, because he says, all right, we're not going to do the tariffs anymore. But it's not going to go back down to normal anymore, because everybody's already really, really nervous, especially the Europeans. Mm-hmm. The Europeans, the Chinese. I'll let you comment on this thing. No. This thing with the Chinese that he's doing now, where he says, well, the Chinese and us, we're talking. We're having a conversation. We're working on this. And okay, fine. So of course the media. What's the media going to do? They're going to call up China and say, "What have you guys been talking about?" China says, "We aren't talking to this guy. We're not going to talk about this." He has to get rid of all the tariffs first before we even begin to talk to him. Mm-hmm. And like I said before, I mean, the Chinese, they'll starve before they give in. They're not like the United States. They're a communist country. Mm-hmm. The United States, we can yell and scream and vote people out. You can't vote people out in China. So, you have to go with what they say. And so I think, there was this whole thing, the Chinese were quoted something that said, whoever ties the bell must untie it. Mm. And I had to think about that quote for a while. Like, what the heck does that mean? But it's true. It's true. I mean, Trump did this. We're not going to talk to you until you fix the bell.
Yeah. It's fascinating to see these world power leaders outplayed. It's just so.
It's like a playground.
It is, but also, Trump is playing with countries that is not fibbling like he does. I mean, if China says this, I really think that they will do it.
Yeah, that's the thing that everybody is worried about. When Trump says he's going to do something, is he going to do it? Then next week he's not going to do it. Then he's going to do it again. And then, you know how many times the tariffs have been on and then off and then on and then off? I mean, and the world can't deal with this. I mean, the markets are fluctuating all over the place. You know, literally, I have to eat tomato soup because, you know, every time I turn on the computer and I'm looking, oh my gosh, I can't look at this thing again because it's, you know, it's going all over the place. You know, one day the market's up, the next day the market's down. But the problem being is China is saying right now, we're not going to deal with the U.S. anymore. We're not going to send them any more stuff. And they know that the U.S. doesn't have any stuff. They need plastic garbage cans. They know there's only one place to get those garbage cans, and it's China. And so China's making deals with other people. And, you know, what is this going to do with the U.S. dollar? I mean, think about this, Vaughn. It's, you know, we always look to the U.S. dollar. You don't go out and buy Thailand. You don't buy Danish shekels. What do they have in Danish? I don't know what they have in Danish. Anyway, you know, you buy U.S. dollars. But right now, what's the U.S. dollar going to be in a month because of all this stuff? I'm very unsure. And so that is the thing that, you know, people are trying to decide now. Okay, what do I buy now? I mean, U.S. Treasury bonds? I don't think that's a good idea right now. And governments always use U.S. Treasury bonds. And now people are trying to dump their U.S. Treasury bonds. Japan's trying to dump billions of dollars of these things. You know, it was the only thing that held its value. The dollar always held its value. And now we are concerned that maybe by next month, the dollar won't have the same value.
Right. And I think that's one of the reasons why the Chinese government is very confident when it comes to playing their cards against these tariffs or economic or international trade challenges with the U.S. because they know that the dollar is at stake, and China has, you know, I would say as a member of BRICS, they're looking for opportunity to really challenge the dollar. It's a long way, but with this issue, you know, this is an opportunity to really tip the scale and find maybe an alternative currency out of the dollar. It's crazy to say, but
I know. I mean, you know, we're thinking, we're going to be buying Chinese, you know, RMB. I mean, you know that the Chinese is looking at these poll numbers because, like I said before, if China decides to do something, you know, crazy or whatever, the people have to go along with it. They have to go along with it. But in the United States, you know, we don't have to go along with anything we don't like. We can, you know, whatever that means. But you know, right now they can see that the U.S. public is not so happy with how things are going, and the fact that he's at 38% on the economy and even less on the tariffs, you know, China's got to be looking at it and going, you know what, we're in a good seat right now. And the fact that Trump is saying, "Oh yeah, we're talking to China." There was just a meeting, you know, what he said in the interview. There was a meeting, you know, just this morning or something like that. But who was at that meeting? Was it just you guys, just Trump people? And the fact that China's like, "Hey, listen, we're not talking to you at all," and it's got to be, you know, it's got to be a little bit embarrassing to the Trump administration for these kind of things, and you know, there's a lot of other issues too going on in the United States. I mean, right now there's the court system. I mean, you know, Trump is trying to go against the courts, and he's playing his hand, see if he can go up against the courts. And supposedly the people, you know, of course the Democrats are 96% believes that, you know, the court should be, you know, the final word. But what's interesting this week is the Republicans, the people that voted for Trump, are now at 73% believe that the courts should have the upper hand in these decisions, not Donald Trump. And a lot of it has to do with all this business that's going on with the universities. That Trump is like, you know, saying, you know, the universities have to teach what I want to, you know, all this stuff with, you know, finding students that that speak out against his administration, his policies, and then taking away their visas. And this whole thing that happened in, I believe it was Wisconsin.
Yes.
Wisconsin. I figured you might know about this. And I wanted to touch on this because it's kind of shocking in a way that this judge was there, and she had an immigrant in her court, and what ICE, the people, the Trump administration people that come out and they catch these immigrants and they throw them out of the country, What they've been doing is they see who's going to court, and they come to court, and they arrest people when they're at court.
Right.
And so supposedly she let him out a hallway so he wouldn't get arrested or something like that. And so they arrested her.
Yes.
And got her for obstruction of something. I don't know. But how interesting it is to now you're arresting judges. And what is that the first step toward?
Should I say the F word?
It comes to mind. There's a couple of words that come to mind here. But that's the first time I don't think I have ever seen that before. Now, we've arrested judges before because of corruption and stealing money and taking money, but not for something like this.
Yes. It's certainly shocking, you know, as a lawyer, as a law student who went to law school in Wisconsin, who practiced in Wisconsin and is licensed in Wisconsin, seeing this at play really hurts my brain. For a little bit more of context, so the judge is a Supreme Court, state Supreme Court judge, and it's a federal agency who basically arrested her. So because it is a federal
I heard the FBI came in.
Yes,
the FBI actually came in and arrested her.
But then, you know, for her to be arrested, there has to be a warrant, and the warrant was granted by a magistrate, right? So this is really an amazing display of how state and federal courts are at play. But at the same time, I just can't help wrap my head around it. As a lawyer, how was that possible? You know, it's such a
That's what everybody's saying.
Simple.
That's what the news is saying.
Yeah, it's such a simple concept, and I was like, okay, well, they do. Like, yeah, certainly it's federal, so it's higher, but how can you do that so fast? And the turnaround is really fast because the very next day, she has her arraignment and she was released, but then she has to report again. And you know, she was not like, she was almost thrown into prison too. She was basically detained.
Yeah.
And she's a state Supreme Court judge now. So if you take her out one day, that will mess up the whole calendar.
Yeah, I mean, she has dockets of so many cases with her, but she's. I mean, if I'm correct on this,
right.
So she cannot hear cases now.
I believe she still can, but maybe they will take her out or disinvite her. I forgot the legal term for it for certain specific cases. But also as an agent of the government, you have the privilege to move your case fast, so they will expedite the whole process.
Because I listened to that blonde woman from the DOJ talk about this judge as if she was like this major criminal.
Right.
We got to get rid of these criminals, and I'm like, you know, this is kind of an elderly lady who's the judge there, and she's been on the bench, from what I understand, for quite a while.
For a while.
For a while, yeah. And you know, if you look at what the premise behind why she did this, that she could see that they were going to come in and you know, take this guy. You know, if that's the case, if they can look at the docket and see what immigrant is ever going to go to court anymore.
Right.
I wouldn't go to court. If I was an immigrant, I'd be too scared.
Right.
I'd be, you know, and what about immigrants who are victims? Are they going to come to court and testify, and then possibly ICE is going to show up and, like, you know, grab them?
Yeah.
So I think, you know, that's kind of the difficult rub in all of this this stuff about these you know, they don't tell anybody ahead of time.
Right.
They just show up and take people and, you know, send them out of the country in the same day, sometimes to a prison in the middle of nowhere. I mean, it's just kind of almost insane to hear these kind of things happen. And I understand what maybe the judge was trying to do.
Right. But even then, we don't really know if it was the intention of the judge.
Yeah, that was something else that came up. Is, you know, they didn't really ask. They just said, you know, oh, you obstructed justice, and she's like, well, no, I didn't. And they go, well, all right, we're arresting you.
Right, and then and the guy that they arrested is already detained. That means the FBI already have information of where this person would go.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of like holes in this thing.
Right, and I think can I add something? I think I know why Trump in particular is targeting Wisconsin. If you remember, not too long ago, a few weeks ago, they had a Supreme Court election. And Wisconsin, being Wisconsin, very purple state, it was an election for Wisconsin Supreme Court judge between just one seat filled up. Wisconsin has 7 Supreme Court judges. Right now, at that time, they're at the deadlock, 3 conservative, 3 very liberal. And of course, and then during that campaign, a few weeks ago, Elon Musk actually flew to Milwaukee to
$25 million
to incite voters or to encourage voters to vote for the conservative person.
That had to sting.
Yeah.
To spend all that money and then lose.
Big time.
And lose. And I think that was a big message to the Trump administration.
Right.
And you could be right. Your theory could be right. That's why they're really
they're bullying that. And Judge Dugan, the judge that was arrested, is famously liberal. She's one of the senior Supreme Court judges in Wisconsin.
Obviously, if what they say is true, of course, she, I think the guy was in there for domestic violence or so. I don't remember what the charge was exactly. But I could see, how a lot of judges now are they're worried. They're worried about the people that are coming to them. And all these things about the courts now demanding that the Trump administration bring these people back from these prisons, and the Trump administration is like, well, you know what, you're the court, we're the president, we have say, and the court's like, no, actually you have to do what we say. And I think that's going to be a very interesting contention coming up very soon. And when is it going to hit the top, the heated, when it gets up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court says, you have to do this, Mr. President, and he goes, you know what, I'm the president, I can do anything I want. And
it's very, very interesting, especially with in the context of state powers versus federal powers. So it's those things are, as a lawyer, always fascinating to me. In hindsight, it's good to learn and know and see how these laws interact and play, but it's also very disheartening and very heartbreaking to see how it affects people, because ultimately some people are going to get hurt in these kind of conflicts.
And speaking of court cases, I wanted to bring up this next subject because a lot of people out there, anybody who's watched this show for years, we used to talk about this guy on the show, George Santos. Now, everybody there's going to go, oh, that guy. Because he used to be a congressman. He was a Republican congressman out of New York. And we just love talking about him because the whole media had just such a field day with this guy because he was just one of the most interesting stories. He's back in the news. And this is just kind of an update because we're kind of at the end of the story. And it's been a great story because George he was a Republican, he was the perfect candidate. Obviously, he won his seat there in New York. He went to a good college. He had a great employment background there in Wall Street. Very conservative guy, totally supported Trump, and he was gay. Which was perfect for the Republicans. They needed a gay guy in Congress who was a Republican.
Who is also who identifies as a person of color. Don't forget that.
But the interesting thing about George was nothing that came out of his mouth was true. Everything he said turned out to be a lie. Where he went to school, did he work at Goldman Sachs or Citicorp, or did he ever work anywhere in Wall Street? Was his ancestors Jewish? Which he said he was. And then later, when they said, listen, we checked on you. I can't believe he didn't think anybody was going to check. We checked on you. Your ancestors weren't Jewish. And he goes, oh no, I meant they were Jewish. And I remember when he said that. Talked about his grandparents who fled the Holocaust. And then we find out that his grandparents were born in Brazil.
My favorite is I think he said something about his mom dying in 9/11.
His mom died in 9/11. And then it turns out that they found that his mother did indeed die in 2016. She wasn't even in the United States yet during that time. He was a volleyball star. At New York University, where he also never got his MBA. He had employees that died in the Pulse nightclub massacre. I mean, lies that just, why would you say something like that? And this whole thing that he married this woman for U.S. citizenship, and then in 2013 he promised this gay man he would marry him for citizenship, and then in 2014 he promised another gay man that he would marry. Anyway, he told everybody he was a multimillionaire. He told everybody that he was the producer of Spider-Man on Broadway. I mean, it's unending. But one of the best ones, and we did a whole show.
Oh my goodness!
This whole thing.
I need to watch this show.
We did the whole thing before about the fact that he owned a charity called Friend of Pets. Now this one makes me kind of mad because I do enjoy my pets. It's called Friend of Pets United, and he started a GoFundMe page for a veteran service dog. A guy that was injured in the military, and he had a service dog.
I remember this now.
He raised $3,000 for this, and then he kept the money, and then the dog died.
Yeah.
And
I don't know why I'm laughing, but that's
it's just he was at a rally for a Stop the Steal of Donald Trump. When he was saying, Donald Trump was saying, well, they stole the election from me when he didn't win. He was wearing a scarf when he did the interview on the street at the Stop the Steal rally. The scarf was stolen from his previous roommate. I mean, this is the kind of guy. I mean, we could go up, but the main thing was he stole from the donors of his election campaign. He got donated money for his election campaign. He took that money and bought fancy clothes with it and fancy dinners, and he went on trips and did all these things that you can't do with money that donors give you. So anyway, eventually they tossed him out of Congress, which wasn't easy. Mm-hmm. It took a while because the Republicans didn't want to get rid of him. Like I said, he was the perfect guy for the Republicans. And at that time, the majority was very, very close. And so they finally had to get rid of him. And then as soon as they got rid of him, he was arrested. Right. So this week, finally, after all the trials and tribulations of George Santos, he was sentenced to 7 years for all these crimes. And he said, I cannot rewrite the past, but I can control the road ahead. I've tried my best, as tears streamed down from his face. And the judge said, whatever.
And don't forget that how he, when he spoke to the media after, he kind of was, hinting Trump to give him a pardon. Mm-hmm. So I thought that was the most interesting part.
I wonder, I'm sure that Trump didn't even notice that he got 7 years, even though George Santos was a big Trump supporter. Mm-hmm. I don't think Trump ever even noticed that he was around. But I used to love to watch him in Congress because he'd come in wearing these incredible purple jackets. Very snappy dresser.
I remember that.
Very snappy dresser. But he's been ordered to pay $373,000 in restitution. Mm-hmm. And it looks like he's going to have to do some jail time.
Yep, he's going to have to. I mean, it's just fascinating because he is this character in Congress who's fabricated so much lies that the public view him as an entertaining figure. I mean, he went on to these various podcasts talking about his experience, both liberal and conservative podcasts hosts had a blast with him. He's this memeable character, and now that he is sentenced, nobody takes him seriously.
No, I mean, right after he was a congressman, he went on to this thing where you get paid in order to say happy birthday to your friend. He was like $600. You got to pay this guy, and he'll say happy birthday to your friend.
I remember that. Yeah, but he's like an icon of fraud and lying, basically. But my favorite thing about his effect in the gay community, I guess, there's a lot of drag queens who
he said that he's never been a drag queen. And then they had videos of him as a drag queen. I mean, it's one of the things I had to do the follow-up because it's the end, because we talked so much about him when he was in Congress. And the fact that he could get into Congress. Nobody checked up. Nobody checked on him because the Republicans loved him. Mm-hmm. They thought he was so great. And of course now we have all these things going on in the Republican Party right now. Mm-hmm. Which kind of always we go back, that's like a George Santos, what they're doing there. But next week we'll get to some of those things because this week we're going to talk a little bit about, the Trump meme coin. We'll talk about that next week. That's really something. Talk about corruption at its highest level. But we'll talk about that amongst quite a bunch of other things that we didn't get to this week. Well, some of the environmental stuff that I really want to talk about because it's becoming big news now. But until then, Attorney Vaughn, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you. It's always a blast being here.
It's always
Thank
a
you,
blast
Eric.
having you on the show. My name is Eric Lecain, here on the World News Jam on DZRJ Radio and Radio Bandito TV. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. We will be back again next week, so please join us then. And everybody, be safe out there. We'll see you next week.
The views and comments of the hosts and guests are not necessarily those of the station.